the buyer don't have the ability to pay the amount for certain goods what he purchased, then you can stop the transit of goods in between and you can take back that goods from the transit place. When the buyer or his agent obtains delivery of the goods before their arrival at the appointment destination, when the carrier wrongfully refuses to deliver the goods to the buyer or his agent. Hello everyone, I'm Arun Kumar, lecturer in Department of Commerce and Management, Vidhyaashram First Grade College, the Temple of Excellence, MYSURU. Dear students, welcome to this new session, that is session 5 on unit number 2. The unit name is the Sale of Goods Act 1930. Yes, in the earlier sessions we were discussing about what is unpaid seller and what are the rights unpaid seller we having and other topics we discussed in the earlier session. In this session we are going to discuss few more topics with respect to the Sale of Goods Act. And here in this particular chapter we are studying about what is Sale of Goods Act, what is goods and what is sale, and how they'll get into an agreement, how that agreement will be converted as a contract, and what and all the conditions they are supposed to fulfill, what we are supposed to do in case if the buyer have not paid the amount. This and all we are discussing in this particular unit. Now in this session we will be discussing about few more topics with respect to that. So the first thing is right of stoppage of goods in transit. Right of stoppage of goods in transit. So what is this transit? Transit is nothing but transportation. Transit is nothing but transportation. That is transferring or delivering the goods from the seller place to the buyer place. That is called transit. So right of stoppage of goods in transit. So what and all the rights will be having to stop the goods at the time of transporting the goods from the seller place or to the buyer place. So the right of stoppage in transit means the right of stopping further transit of the goods while they are with a carrier for the purpose of transmission to the buyer, resuming possession of them and retaining possession until payment or tender of the price. So here stoppage of goods from transit is nothing but we will be transporting the goods from our place to the buyer place, right? For example, Amazon. Again, we'll take the same example, Amazon. So what we will do, we place an order. What we will do, we place an order with Amazon. But Amazon is not manufacturing that product. Someone else will be manufacturing that product. So let us say Mr. A. Okay, Mr. A. Mr. A is a seller. Mr. A is a seller, and next in between we have Amazon. We have Amazon. Next, Mr. B. Mr. B, this Mr. B is buyer. Okay, Mr. A is a seller, Mr. B is a buyer. In between what we have? We have intermediary called Amazon. So what we will do, we place an order as a buyer, we place order. What we do, we place order with Amazon. Okay, so what Amazon will do, Amazon inform the seller. Amazon what they'll do, they inform the seller that this order is received from a particular customer and you are supposed to supply it. Then what seller will do, this seller supply the goods. What he will do? He supply. He supply the goods with Amazon and Amazon deliver the goods. What Amazon will do? Amazon deliver the goods to the buyer, right? So in this process, we can stop the transit of goods to buyer until this buyer make the payment. Okay, until the buyer make the payment, this buyer make payment, we can stop the transit of goods in between. Okay, so you already, Mr. A, you already transited the goods to Amazon center. Okay, Amazon courier center. So there itself he can stop until he receives the amount from the buyer. Whatever the amount the buyer is supposed to pay, that amount should be paid by the buyer. Then only this buyer receives the goods. He receives goods. Only if the payment is made, then buyer will be receiving the goods. If payment is not made, then the goods will not be delivered to the buyer. That is what this particular right of stoppage of goods in transit this says. So the right of stoppage in transit means, again, the right of stopping further transit. Further transit is nothing but further transportation of the goods while they are with a carrier for the purpose of transmission to the buyer, and resuming possession of them and retaining possession until payment is made by the buyer. So we stop the transportation in between itself, and we stop the possession of the goods also. We will not give the possession of the goods to the buyer. We stop the possession of goods also, we stop the transportation also until the buyer makes the payment. Next, moving further, the right of stoppage can be exercised only when the following conditions are satisfied. So in all the cases, you can't stop the transit while you are transiting the goods to the buyer. Only on certain condition you can stop the transit of goods. So which are those conditions? The first one is the seller should be an unpaid seller. That means whoever is selling the goods, that person, if yet is not received, then you can stop the transit of goods in between or in middle. Okay. If a seller is an unpaid seller, if the seller yet not received the amount of goods from the buyer, then you can stop the transit. Next, the buyer must have become insolvent. That means if the buyer don't have the ability to pay the amount. Okay, if you get to know that the buyer don't have the ability to pay the amount for certain goods what he purchased, then you can stop the transit of goods in between and you can take back the goods from the transit place. Next, the seller must have parted with the possession of the goods. Yes, the seller must have parted with the possession of the goods. See, in case if the seller have some part of goods with him, then again he can stop the transit of goods to the buyer. Next, the goods must be in the course of transit. Yes, to stop the transit of goods, first the goods must be in transit. That means the goods must be in the stage of transportation. Then only you can stop the transportation of goods and you can take back the possession of the goods for you. Okay. So the first thing is the seller should be the unpaid seller. That means yet the amount is not received by the seller, he can stop. Next, the buyer must have become insolvent. That means if the buyer don't have the ability to pay the amount, then he can stop the transit of goods. Then if the seller have some parts of that goods, you have the possession of some parts of the transit goods, then he can stop. And the course of transit, that is the goods must be in the course of transit. If the goods are in transporting position, then we can stop the transit of goods in between. Only in these special cases we have the right of stoppage of goods in transit. That is what section 52 says. Duration of transit. Duration of transit. So what is this duration of transit? The goods are deemed to be in transit from the time when they are delivered to a carrier or other bailee for the purpose of transmission to the buyer or his agent takes delivery of them. So duration of transit is nothing but when the transit take place. Okay, when the transit take place. So the goods are deemed to be in transit from the time when they are delivered, to a carrier. Okay, some courier person will be there. Okay, until he delivers the product, it is not delivered to the buyer. But once the seller reaches the courier point, if the seller reaches the courier point, and if that seller or if the courier person receives the goods, from that time the transit or transportation of goods will start. Okay, the goods will be under transit mode. That means the seller already given that goods to the courier boy or to some agent to deliver to the buyer. From that time the transit will start until the goods received by the buyer or by the agent appointed by the buyer. That duration will be transit duration. Whatever, for example, 5th, okay, 5th 2023, what I'll do, I sold the goods and I handed over these goods to courier person, okay, to a agent. And what agent will do? This agent deliver the goods to the buyer. He deliver the goods to the buyer, say on 14/5/2023. Okay, 14/5/2023. So here you can see the number of days, 9 days. So this 9 days is called duration of transit. So from the time of reaching the agent and delivering it to the buyer, whatever the duration is called, that duration is called duration of transit of goods from the seller to the buyer. Next, termination of transit and right of stoppage. So when we can terminate the transit and the right of stoppage, what and all the rights we have to stop the goods, transition of goods, that is transportation of goods. The transit comes to an end in the following cases. Okay, the transit comes to an end in the following cases. In few cases, even though we are transporting the goods, we can take back it. Only in these few cases. Delivery to the buyer. Yes, when the buyer or his agent obtains delivery of the goods before their arrival at the appointment destination. So here the delivery to the buyer is nothing but when the buyer or his agent obtains, the delivery of the goods before their arrival at the appointed destination. So whatever the destination is given to the buyer or to the buyer agent, if that goods is received before the arrival time, then the termination of transit will occur. Next, interception by the buyer. So what is this interception by the buyer? When the buyer or his agent takes delivery after the goods have reached a destination. Yes. So what will happen? One date is given. Okay. One time is given. So after the time they go and collect the goods. Okay. That is called interception by the buyer. That means when the buyer or the buyer's agent takes delivery after the goods have reached destination. So we had given one date, for example, let us say again 5th May 2023, we had given this date, but the goods is collected on 6th May 2023. Okay, so the goods is arrived on what date? The goods is arrived on 5th May, but when it is collected, it is collected on 6th May. That is, after the goods reach to the particular point, then the goods is collected by the buyer. Next, acknowledgement to the buyer. Acknowledgement to the buyer. When the goods have arrived at their destination and the carrier acknowledges to the buyer or his agent that holds the goods on his behalf. That means once the goods reached and the acknowledgement is issued, okay, once the goods reached, if the acknowledgement is issued by the carrier or by the courier person or by the agent, transit agent, to the buyer or buyer's agent, then the termination of transit will occur. That means that will comes to an end. The transit will comes to an end. So at the time of delivery to the buyer, that means before the delivery time, if he receives exactly the transit will comes to an end. Even the goods is received by the buyer after the date of delivery also, the transit comes to an end. And once the acknowledgement is issued to the buyer, then the transit contract will comes to an end. And also goods delivered to buyer's carrier. That means goods delivered to the buyer's carrier. That means to collect the goods, if buyer appointed any other agent on behalf of the buyer, if any other agent collect the goods, that will also considered as termination of transit. That means end of transit from the seller to the buyer. Next, wrongful refusal to delivery. Wrongful refusal to delivery. That means when the carrier wrongfully refuses to deliver the goods to the buyer or his agent. Yes, if in case, if the delivery boy or if the agent, courier agent, if he wrongfully refuses to deliver to the buyer or to the buyer agent, then that will also be considered as termination of transit. Next, part delivery of goods. When part delivery of the goods has been made to the buyer with an intention of delivering the whole of the goods, then the transit will be at an end for the remainder of the goods also, which are yet in the course of the transit. That means almost the goods is transferred or transported to the buyer's place. So few of the parts of that particular goods are yet to be delivered. That is called part delivery of goods. In that time also, in that situation also, in that case also, we can terminate the transit. Next, right of resale. So when a seller can resale the product which is already sold to someone else. Okay, the goods is already sold to someone else, but again is selling the same goods to the second party or to the third party. So it is defined under section 54. So if the buyer fails to pay or offer the price within a reasonable time, the unpaid seller has the right to resell the goods in the following circumstances. So what I will do, I sell a goods or I sell a product to a person. Okay, if that person fails to pay the amount, if the buyer fails to pay the amount, then as a seller, I will be having all the right to resell the product or to resell the goods to someone else or to the third party. Only in few cases. So which are those cases? Where the goods are of a perishable nature. That means if the goods are perishable, if we can keep the goods only for 1 week or for 1 month or for 1 year, in that kind of situations, if the amount is not paid, for example, you sold vegetables, but the buyer didn't pay the amount, what you'll do, you'll wait for 1 day, and if the amount is not paid by the buyer, you'll sell the same vegetables to the another person. That is called perishable nature. That means where the goods are of a perishable nature. If the goods are perishable condition, you can sell it to the other person if the amount is not paid by the buyer. Another condition, where the unpaid seller has exercised his right of land or stoppage in the transit and gives notice to the buyer of his intention resell the goods, So the goods is in transit process. So at that time, if the amount is not paid, if the goods is stopped from transit and the information is come to the notice of the buyer, then again the seller can resell the goods. If the seller already intimated the buyer about resale of the goods, at that time he can resell the goods to the third party. Next, where the seller expressly reserves his right of resale. Yes, if the seller have the right, then obviously he can resell the product to the third party, whichever the product is already sold to the another person without taking any permission of the previous buyer. He can resell it to the someone else only if the seller expressly reserves his right of resale. So with this, I'm going to wind up this session. In the upcoming session, we'll discuss few more topics with respect to this particular unit or to the other topics. So until then, thank you all. Have a nice day. Namaste.